Regulator, mount up. We're coming.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and we have another very open evening here for conversation. So if you want to jump in the chat right now, questions, thoughts, comments, I'm actually curious if you want to start out here with just what are you talking about with your friends about the Vikings right now? Because I'm going to have an update on the GM search, and we've got the schedule coming out tomorrow. I'll be going live as soon as the schedule drops. We were scheduled to have Manny Hill, but he's at a family thing, probably won't be able to join tomorrow night, but that will not stop me from breaking down the schedule game by game, picking it along with you guys for the very first time, talking about best road trips and toughest matchups and toughest runs of games and all that sort of stuff tomorrow night. But what about right now? Like, what are you debating? What are you having discussions with your friends in terms of topics? Because I was golfing yesterday with Dane Mizutani and Myron Metcalf and Sam Ekstrom, a couple of my friends, and we were in the wind blowing around like crazy. And we were actually having the conversation about NFC teams because I was telling them about the power rankings, and we were going back and forth for like 3 holes about like, well, what if Chicago, gets Caleb Williams to take the next step? And yeah, but they don't have a pass rush. And what about the Lions? Like, what if they're finally healthy and they have this offense that's fantastic, but the defense finally stays together? So we were going back and forth. What have you guys been talking about as the schedule gets to release? But we've got a lot of time here. I've got a few things I want to go through. And since I do not enjoy strength of schedule very much, I have a list of the teams that are the most and least improved that will be facing the Minnesota Vikings this year. So we'll get to that as well. So why don't we jump right in to the new GM? I almost said improved, but they kind of seem almost exactly the same. General manager candidates, my friends. Tom Pelissero reports that the Vikings have requested interviews with Detroit Lions assistant GM Ray Agnew, Broncos assistant GM Reed Burkhardt, and Dolphins assistant GM Kyle Smith for their general manager job. Yes, you've probably noticed something, that every single one of these candidates so far has been an assistant general manager. And I'm going to run through their backgrounds, and you're not going to be shocked by any of the backgrounds. It's not going to be, hey, this guy came from the woodworking world and now he's a general manager, or this guy invented a data machine that plugs out all the different best draft picks. No, these are very similar to our first batch of candidates. So why don't we jump into each gentleman that is going to be interviewed for the job. Kyle Smith, the current assistant general manager of the Miami Dolphins, just became the assistant GM of the Dolphins. He was previously the assistant general manager of the Atlanta Falcons under Troy Fontenot. And before that, he worked in scouting. That's where he started as a scouting intern in 2010 in Washington, D.C., eventually became the Commanders VP of player personnel in 2020, and has worked his way up the ladder. Our next GM candidate for the Vikings is actually the first GM candidate who I have played golf with, and that is Reed Burkhardt, the assistant general manager of the Denver Broncos. Pre-COVID, the Vikings used to have a media golf tournament. It wasn't really a tournament because if we kept score, I don't know, right? It might get ugly. But one time I was paired with Courtney Cronin, Rob Brzezinski, and Reed, and we played 9 holes together, and it was a grand time. That was quite a few years ago when Reed was part of the Minnesota Vikings scouting staff, and then he got bumped up to director of pro scouting under Rick Spielman. I do know that Reed is a very sharp guy and is very highly thought of. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been hired by George Payton to go out to the Denver Broncos. They've built a phenomenal roster out there. And I know that, there is a perception that Sean Payton is just pulling every string and, everybody else just kind of works for him. And there's some truth to that. It is a coach-led franchise, but George Payton and Sean Payton, yeah, that's right. And Sean Payton have worked together very closely, and Reid has been a huge part of their success building a roster out there. And Reid was a big part of building Vikings rosters under Rick Spielman as a scout, and then moved his way up the scouting department in Minnesota. So a lot of success there for Reid and a connection with the Minnesota Vikings. And then, so he's on the younger side, and I mean younger-ish. He's old enough to have been, with the Vikings for 13 seasons, and then now the director of player personnel, then up to AGM with the Broncos since 2022. But compared to our next candidate, who's been around quite a bit longer in the NFL, that is Ray Agnew of the Detroit Lions. So he joined the Lions in 2021 as their director of pro scouting, and then worked for the Los Angeles Rams. So we have another connection here with Kevin O'Connell, working for the Los Angeles Rams for 18 seasons as a scout. And then Ray Agnew played in the National Football League for 10 years with the Patriots, Giants, and Rams. And I did want to include one other note as we look at the GM candidates here, which is that Albert Breer reported that when they're starting these first round of interviews, usually the way this goes is they have the Zoom interviews, everybody gets together on a Zoom call, and then they'll have the in-person. That's when they fly them in. If you remember the famous, Jim Harbaugh's in Minnesota, well, they'll fly them in. Then they'll have the more, kind of intense meetings with the GM candidates and eventually make a decision. But Albert Breer reported that Kevin O'Connell is a part of the Zoom meetings with the Wilf family. And it also sounds like from a couple of reports that it is kind of a small group that are meeting with these GM candidates. So they don't have, 50 people that are involved. O'Connell said the other day that he would be as involved as the Wilfs want him to be. And it makes a lot of sense. If they want O'Connell and they believe O'Connell is the right guy to be at the very head of the snake of the franchise, that he gets someone like a Ray Agnew that would be connected to him or that gels very well with him. It doesn't have to be someone from the Los Angeles Rams. John Mackey was the other one from the Rams, their current AGM. But once again, what we have here with our list of candidates is all AGMs with all scouting backgrounds. And I do want to be clear that I am absolutely not against the scouting backgrounds. It's just become very obvious what the Wilfs are looking for here. And I think that it represents a shift in their thinking toward building through the draft in the future and building for a longer window. And I'm sure that every team in the NFL would love to build through the draft, hit on every draft pick, and just it would be glorious to just draft every year 7 great players and build a franchise that way. But I think that after really not just under Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, many years of being largely ineffective in the draft. And if you go back, there's some good players that come out of it. It's Josh Metellus, it's Cam Bynum, but really since 2015, and I looked this up, and there's a couple of different ways of valuing drafts and who ranks where. But there's a website called Per36, which has some very interesting draft data in there. And it's got kind of a valuing system. And the Vikings have only, with any of their drafts since 2015, they only ranked in the top 15 in the league in value that they got one time. And it was because of Justin Jefferson in 2020. That's a really long time to be a mediocre drafting team. You've got to be better than that. And I know that a good percentage of that is, hey, if you had hit on JJ McCarthy, that would be way more valuable. And also a good percentage of that is you've always won, or at least relatively won. From 2015 to right now, the worst Viking season was 7 wins. And if you're going to end up with 7 to 14 wins all the time and you're never going to draft in the top 10. I mean, even Seattle had multiple top 10 draft picks in building that team. Even though they remained competitive, they had the trade for Russell Wilson that worked out brilliantly. And then they had, I think Charles Cross was a 9th overall draft pick. They picked, I think 16th was Gray Zabel. So a lot of times if you're drafting always in the 20s, then it's going to be a lot harder. But the way to counteract that is stockpiling draft picks, putting an emphasis on it, letting players go like Jonathan Grenard to get 2 extra 3rd round draft picks, or just letting go veteran players even to just get comp picks, which can be hard to do when you're constantly playing in this world of, oh, we just won a lot of games. Now we have to react to that and spend a bunch of money in free agency, which means that you are not going to get any comp picks when any of your guys leave because that counteracts it. It just feels like they are going for a bit of a change to the way that they have had their rosters built over really a number of years now. It's trading a 1st round pick for Sam Bradford, which should have worked out in 2017, but didn't. It's trading, draft capital for TJ Hawkinson. It's trading draft capital to move up for Dallas Turner. It's right. There's just been a lot of that. And maybe not as much. We're going to put all the emphasis on building through the draft. And I think a major part too is that in previous years, and this is going back pre-pandemic, but it's really been a thing after, is once the Amazon started showing up, once the YouTubes and the Netflixes started showing up and putting games on TV, and there was this acceleration of revenue for the NFL, that meant the salary cap went up and up and up every single year, more than was even projected, which has allowed a lot of teams to keep their free agents. You almost never hear, if a team wants to keep a player they drafted, you almost never hear of, well, they just can't afford it. You just don't hear that. And so if you're going to play in free agency, then you basically either have to get super, super lucky like the Vikings did with Cashman and Grenard and Van Ginkel all being better than they had ever been before when they showed up here, or you can put your eggs into the draft basket and then sprinkle in free agents. Like Jawan Jennings is a perfect example of how you manage free agency. It's, all right, I'm going to let somebody else pay. And I feel bad. I've used this example a few times, but it's just a crazy overpay to me. Kwity Paye getting like $16 million or Romeo Dobbs getting $17 million. We're going to let other teams do that and instead get a number 3 wide receiver. Or here's an Eric Wilson, another linebacker, an Isaiah Rodgers, an outside corner that are plugging gaps on a roster rather than, hey, let's go out into free agency and build a foundation. That's just really hard to do. And I think that, maybe in a different world, had 2022's draft worked out, the Vikings would have done that, but they've been playing from behind for such a long time that I think that the way that they're approaching this GM search says they don't want to do that anymore. So there's pretty much all the thoughts on the new candidates. They're just like the old candidates, but that doesn't mean they're all the same person. A lot of different organizations, a lot of different philosophies. The Rams, connections are obvious, but it's interesting with Detroit because Detroit's been kind of a, we don't care what anyone else thinks about the draft kind of team. And it worked for a short amount of time, but then hasn't worked recently. But he was, Ray Agnew was a longtime NFL player, and Reed Burkhart's on the younger side of a riser, and, the same thing for Kyle Smith. So they're looking, I think, at a lot of different people from a lot of different teams and a lot of people with different backgrounds. And what it feels like they want to do is see who gels the best with Kevin O'Connell and that fits most with the way they want to do this. And also who wants to be here with their structure. I mean, if they want to keep, this is where someone like Reed Burkhardt and Terrence Gray would come into potentially the mix, is that there's a lot of people in the front office who have been in the front office for a long time. Do you want to come in and manage them? Because it doesn't seem like the Vikings are going to just blow out everybody. So are you willing to, do it on their terms as well as be in a certain type of position? Reed is also very familiar with Rob Brzezinski, as his former golf partner. in a Vikings media tournament 2019. But no, truly, like very, very familiar with that setup because Rob's going to be a part of this in some way or another. I think Rob should be the president and then the GM below him. But if that's the way they want to do it, then whoever their candidates are have to agree that that's also how they're comfortable becoming a general manager. If someone else were to have, the final say or maybe veto power or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of layers to work through. And we'll see how that plays out. But I don't have really a timeline for when this is going to happen, but I think we get a very good sense of the type of person that they're looking for. The other news today for the Vikings is that they are going to play in Mexico City. And I was a little surprised by the fact that the Vikings are going to play in Mexico City because I thought after 2 games internationally last year, doesn't that buy you a year of not having to play internationally? But Mexico City is not quite as intense as 2 back-to-back games, which turned out to be a lot for the Vikings. And I think where it was very hard was, maybe they didn't anticipate, was injuries and players recovering and who's practicing. And you don't have TCO Performance Center when you're going overseas for 2 weeks. So I don't know if we'll ever see a team do that again, but going to Mexico City, November 22nd to play the San Francisco 49ers. What this does do is it mitigates an away game. So, this is a neutral site, even though it's, I guess, closer to San Francisco. Right? I don't know if, I think people who show up will just be either travelers that go there or football fans in Mexico City. So it'll be much more of a neutral site game. I think this benefits the Vikings a lot because now when you think about their schedule, it's 9 home games and 7 away games and 1 neutral site game. And they don't have to go to San Francisco, which has not been a very friendly place to them in recent years. But I was a little bit surprised. I guess in terms of trips, that might be one that people want to take in November. Mexico City might be pretty cool, but the Vikings having to go not overseas, over a lot more land, I guess, to get there. Although I made the joke that the 49ers are as close to San Francisco as where they actually play as they are in Mexico City, because Santa Clara is nowhere near San Francisco, as everyone found out when the Super Bowl was there. But I guess a net positive for the Vikings, and it will be interesting. The broadcast, there's always a bunch of things, the elevation, the turf. There's just these different things that come up with these international games, and the Vikings have mostly had success in doing them, so they will be doing it again then. I was looking at something the other day. This is a graphic. I want to show you a graphic that the NFL put out on their social media. This is from, the National Football League. I didn't make this. And it shows strength of schedule rankings. And this always drives me crazy. So this is their graphic that I'm showing here, where it ranks the strength of schedule. And what it's ranked by is opponent win percentage in 2025. And what's odd to me is that doesn't make any sense because teams change by so much. So this has the Vikings as having one of the 10 most difficult schedules in 2026. But there's a lot of things that have changed since 2025. There's always teams that go worst to first. There's always teams that make big improvements. There's always teams that have injuries. There's always teams that are tanking now after going all in and whatever else. So I made this list right here of the most improved Vikings opponents on the eve of the schedule release. So I'm going to run down my list, and then we will get to your questions, comments. We'll get a FanDuel question of the day mixed into our life here, and we will go from there. But let's just start out with this. My most improved Vikings opponents. I'm going to start with the New York Jets. The New York Jets are way better than they were last year because they were a crime against humanity last year. But they've brought in Geno Smith, who is not good, but also much better than Brady Cook and whoever else was playing quarterback for the Jets last year. They have added 3 first-round draft picks that should all play right away, including D'Angelo Pons in the second round. So that's really 4 guys that could be impact players right away in the draft. They went and got some veteran players, including Demario Davis. They kept Breece Hall. Now, it's still a down on their part that Aaron Glenn is still their head coach because it just didn't look like he was really up for the job last year. They also had about the worst roster that you could ever have last season. So they have improved enormously around Geno Smith this year. That doesn't mean they're good. It just means they're most improved. The Commanders are number 2 on my list. They've added a lot in free agency. They get Sonny Styles in the draft, and they get Jaden Daniels back, which I included for most improved because they get their starting quarterback back. But also they hired Durante Jones, who I think is going to be great for the Vikings. Former Viking defensive coordinator, who I think is going to be great for the Commanders. Number 3 on my list is the Carolina Panthers. Big spenders in free agency. They went and got Jalen Phillips. They got Devin Lloyd, linebacker, impact player. They drafted some potential starters or impact players, weapons around Bryce Young, Chris Brazzell, 2 offensive linemen that could potentially help them. Defensive tackle, Lee Hunter. But I thought Carolina did a lot to get better and spend. New Orleans also getting Jordan Tyson in the draft. They're number 4 on my list. Not just that, but they've made other additions to that team. Travis Etienne was probably the biggest one. And if Tyler Shuck takes a big step forward, then the Saints can be much better. So there's like 4 of the opponents that you probably would have gone, okay, well, they weren't that good last year. Their records weren't that good last year, but they could all be a lot better. Now, there's another side to that, of course. The Bills are next. They got Bradley Chubb. They had a solid draft, couple second rounders that could make an impact, but it really falls off from those first 4 of teams that may have completely overhauled their teams. It's more of just, one addition here or there, but the Bills got DJ Moore, and that's, a guy who's fallen off from where he was 2 years ago, but still, we've seen DJ Moore be really good against the Minnesota Vikings, and he's probably Josh Allen's best receiver since Stephon Diggs. So that's big for them. Mike Evans goes to San Francisco. They do lose Juwan Jennings. They largely stayed the same. They're 6th on my list. The Patriots, what I baked into the Patriots being 7th is that they get A.J. Brown. It seems like the most thing that's going to happen thing that I've ever heard of. It's like the deal has been done for a long time, but they can't do it until after June 1st. So we wait. But I baked that in, assuming that it's going to happen. And we're finding out that the insider who was pushing it was very credible on the New England Patriots, or at least very dialed in. So I'm including that as an improvement for them over Stephon Diggs. Didn't make huge moves in the offseason, but I'm putting them number 7. Detroit is 8, and this is the group that didn't really change very much. Detroit didn't make a lot of huge moves, didn't have any splashy draft picks, but they're still solid, and they made a couple additions. That's the middle of the list. Same with the Packers. The Bears, this is where the list goes the other way. Packers are the same exact team, relying on the same exact stuff. So they didn't do much outside of getting Javon Hargrave. 10th on my list is the Bears, who probably got worse overall. They lost several players in the secondary, did not improve on the defensive line, and lost Drew Dahlman and tried to replace him with 2 undersized centers. Not going to likely be the same from last year. The Bucs losing Mike Evans and losing Rachaad White, not doing a whole lot to improve that. They did get Reuben Bain, who I think is going to be good, but losing Mike Evans is just huge. Indianapolis barely did anything in the offseason other than keep Daniel Jones. They didn't have any money. They are 12th. Atlanta got Tua, which I don't think makes you better, and they're 13th. I'm not sure that they had, because they traded their first round pick. I'm not sure they had a single impact move the entire offseason. And then the Dolphins are intentionally trying to lose. So they did get Malik Willis, which helps them, but they are the least improved team. They have like $7 gazillion in dead cap. They cut everybody, and they've torn it down basically to the screws. They have no weapons for their starting quarterback, so they are 14th. There you go. And the Dolphins weren't that bad last year. They were a middling team. So that's why last year's record, when we look at these, last year's record might mean something for Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago because they're very similar, but certainly not for a team like the Jets, and certainly not for a team like the Dolphins. The Jets are much harder of an opponent, and the Dolphins are not much harder of an opponent at all. So there is your list. You could tell me if you agree or disagree with the most or least improved opponents for the Minnesota Vikings coming up. I'm very excited about the schedule coming out, and we're going to have a really fun show tomorrow night to break that down. So here's the FanDuel question of the day. I'll get to the fan chat in just a second, but real quick, FanDuel question of the day. So I noticed that today was the day that the shows, the TV shows, they argue with each other, started to debate, where does Kyler Murray rank in the NFC North for quarterbacks? And some had him as first, some had him as fourth. And so I'm interested in what you think of that. But here's what I keep coming back to with Kyler Murray, is that Justin Jefferson has a chance at a bounce back year. So Justin Jefferson right now is plus 1,700 for Offensive Player of the Year on FanDuel. I want you to tell me what you think Justin Jefferson is going to do if Kyler Murray can start 17 games. Can he win Offensive Player of the Year? 1,500 yards? What is it going to be? And if you want to answer the question of where Kyler can rank in those top 4 teams in the NFC North, then feel free to do so. So there's your FanDuel question of the day. Now let's get to your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, and whatever is on your guys' mind. I am absolutely down to chat about. Very curious. I threw it out there early in the show about what you're talking about at the water cooler, if you have one, or your group chat, or your Zoom meetings before the boss gets there, regarding the Vikings, not regarding anything else. Okay. Evan says, I knew we'd get a podcast before Jaren Hall's retirement, or for Jaren Hall's retirement. I didn't know that Jaren Hall retired, but I'm happy for him, I think, because he should retire. Look, Jaren was a hardworking guy, but I think he would actually make a better quarterbacks coach than he's going to make a quarterback in the NFL. And the hit that he took against Atlanta was so nasty that some folks are not really made for this physically in terms of size, speed, arm, power, violence. And that was Jaren. Some cannot play at the speed of the NFL, and that was him. And it happens all the time, but when it happens to a quarterback, it can get really ugly. If it happens to a strong safety, you might never notice it in a game. He might be out there backpedaling all night long, and you don't ever realize it. But when it comes to a quarterback, it's gonna be pretty obvious. So, okay. Pizza Gary, thank you for the super chat, sir. Really appreciate that. Says it's going to be funny when Kyler's 6-2 dinged up. McCarthy comes in, loses the first 2, but then rattles off 5 in a row, only to get hurt to have Wentz take us to the promised land. Okay, well, you've already, and look, this what's going to come along with the schedule launch is going to be, we're going to pick the schedule, but we're also going to kind of lay out what we think of the games and make some predictions and things like that. So that's yours. That's a funny one. It's probably the most Vikings way. I've always said that if the Vikings do win the Super Bowl, it has to be weird. It can't be that they just draft a top 5 quarterback and he plays great and they win the Super Bowl. It's got to be something that makes absolutely no sense. But you do touch on something, Pizza Gary, that has been on my mind a lot. And I did an appearance, I don't know when it's coming out soon. I recorded with Bucky Brooks on his show. And he was talking about, the quarterback situation. And my thing for JJ McCarthy is that I hope for his sake that he really, truly embraces his opportunity here to get better. I don't think that it is a true competition, as in Kevin O'Connell is sitting there counting which guy had more good throws each day and putting him in a spreadsheet and saying, oh, well, McCarthy's got a 1 throw lead on Kyler going into the last preseason game. No, I don't think it's like that. Kyler is a very good NFL quarterback, so he's going to start. But, McCarthy, as you said, with Kyler, could get opportunities to play and is very likely to, and can develop during this time and be healthy and be ready to do it. We don't have to write someone off after such a short period of time. And I was saying to Bucky that I feel like the rookie quarterback contract has made us all think that we have to have the guy or his entire story is told in the first year or two. And teams have treated it this way. So it's not just you and I, it's teams have treated it this way too, that the story has to be written on a quarterback that quickly, even though historically a lot of quarterbacks have turned corners after several seasons in the NFL. So if JJ McCarthy really truly embraces this and treats it as a great opportunity to get much better over the summer and into the season, then I think he can have long-term big-time benefits from that and eventually become the quarterback that people thought he was going to be and possibly prove it to the organization still. That's none of it is completely off the table. Just because, people make memes or whatever about JJ not being any good or something doesn't mean, as we saw from Sam Darnold, just because the world decides exactly what you are in your first couple of starts doesn't mean you have to be that. So I think if he treats it like an opportunity rather than a setback, that he can make the most of it. But your scenario, it's not crazy. It's not crazy in some ways. That's for sure. Is this Sneedley? Says it will end up being one of KOC's minions as a GM. I'm not so sure that I would say minions exactly when you're talking about people who have played in the NFL like Ray Agnew and worked for the best organization in football, the Los Angeles Rams, and then went to another organization that's completely turned around under Brad Holmes and drafted well and built their franchise well and success. If you're saying that's just a KOC minion, I feel like that's pretty disrespectful to a former NFL player and pretty nasty defensive tackle in his day, Ray Agnew. So I don't know it's going to be like that, but the relationship between the GM and the head coach is going to be very interesting. And is it you want it to be a collaboration, but is it a situation like we had over the summer, which I thought worked very well, where you had a decision maker who was the guardrails and who was operating, the meetings and everything else, and then managing the assets and making final decisions, because Brzezinski did have final say over any sort of roster move and decision. That doesn't mean that he was holding a gavel and saying, no, we will not overspend for your favorite tailback. Like, I don't think it was like that. But if you want someone who's presiding over those meetings, coming to conclusions as a group, and KOC having a big voice in that, but also the general manager having the credibility like a Ray Agnew, I would say, to say, I'm sorry, we're just not going to do that. Like, that's not good for us as a long-term franchise. That's probably the best way that you can go about it, is to have somebody that has that final decision-making power, but of course is working closely with Kevin O'Connell. And I guess I see your point, though, even though you put it in that way. I see what you're saying is it going to be someone who basically just works for Kevin O'Connell? Like, you go get me this, you go get me that. And I think we saw with at least Brzezinski there that it probably didn't work that way. I'm sure they would have loved to have kept Jonathan Grenard, and I'm sure that there were a few free agents, as they were keeping their powder dry and trying to be as patient as possible, that they wanted to, hey, can we jump at those free agents? And it was managed the right way. So I think you want somebody to come in and have it be very similar to what it's been with Rob Brzezinski and the relationship with Kevin O'Connell. Coming to conclusions as a group seems to be something that's very important to the Wilfs. They don't seem to want like that one towering figure who is like the face of the franchise GM, like a Howie Roseman or a Les Snead. But they are clearly looking for people who can take on the other part of the offseason that the coaches only get involved in late in the process. Like Kyle Shanahan pulled back the curtain a little too far and got ripped on the internet for it when he said, yeah, pretty much I have like 200 players that I'm going through that they've presented to me, the scouting staff, and I just look at the highlight cut-ups first, and if I don't like them, we're not drafting that player. It's like, what? But yeah, I mean, the coaches, they don't have the time to go through the whole process that the college scouts and so forth do. So they want somebody who has managed that side or is going to manage that side and then be able to loop in the coaches when it's time for the draft. So It's an interesting process, though, and an interesting relationship there, I think, that they're going to have. Pizza Gary says, my friends like other teams, they say nothing positive about our offseason, but your podcast has made me realize, especially through your guests, that it was a pretty good offseason. I would say it was. I mean, I think the issue, Gary, is just that it took a long time to present itself, that we got to free agency and we went, okay, restructure some contracts, Rob. Get some free agents. We're live on the Purple Insider channel. Do something. And then they did nothing. It was like, okay, what's going on? Does Rob work here? Did we hear the tires squeal out of the parking lot in the back? Like Rob said, screw you guys. I'm not doing free agents. No, that's not what happened. They were just patient and they waited. And they had to wait even past when free agency started, if you remember, for Kyler Murray to make his decision. So we didn't know what they were doing at quarterback. There was a lot of things that were unclear. And then we get to the end of free agency and look at the roster and go, there's some pretty big holes here in this roster. And then they end up with a draft that addresses some of the biggest holes at defensive tackle. They end up with Jauan Jennings at the end of the rainbow here after everything is settled, and they don't have to give up any comp pick for that to sign Jauan Jennings because it was past the deadline. So I think because it was a slower offseason, the way that it played out, like if all of this stuff happened on day one, if they signed Jauan Jennings on day one, then we would have felt very differently about it. But it's much better to sign him after you don't have any penalty for comp picks. And then the trade of Jonathan Grenard is also something that I think if you are on the outside, you're like, well, you just got worse. And it is very possible that they did if Dallas Turner can't rise to the occasion, but you can see the vision of a little longer term, setting yourself up for much more flexibility into the future, which is ultimately good for them. But it was not an offseason that was flashy or that was going to catch anybody's attention, but you go position by position. Safety is definitely one that still has a lot of questions there. But aside from that, it's a subtle improvement at receiver. It's a subtle improvement in the backfield. It's a subtle improvement in depth in the offensive line. You know what does not get your friends talking to you at work about the Minnesota Vikings is Ryan Vandemark. But you know what will make you very happy in week 8 if Christian Darrisaw can't play? Ryan Vandemark not being just in school. So those types of things. And look, defensive tackles and a versatile outside linebacker. Wow, I could just hear Mel Kiper arguing with whoever on TV, right? Like it just was not controversial at all. And Kyler is the only part of it that is a needle mover. And I think we've been over that a lot, that people just don't think Kyler's any good outside of people who have actually covered Kyler, like the guests that I had on the show, or the Vikings, who can see where he could take this offense potentially with way more support than he's had in Arizona. So yeah, I think it takes looking like very closely to kind of really get it. Alexander, it would be a home run move to hire Agnew from the Lions as the new GM, elevate Rob to president of football operations, and block the Lions from getting 2 third-round comp picks. Now you're playing. That's what happens. So you're referencing what happened with the Atlanta Falcons hiring Ian Cunningham. So they hired him, but technically Matt Ryan is the top decision maker. So they did not get comp picks for hiring a minority, and it's been a huge thing in Chicago. Those people, their fans are very angry that they didn't get the extra draft picks, and realistically, they probably should have. But that the NFL, this is according to Kaylin Kaler of ESPN when she was on the show the other day, she said the NFL only recognizes one decision maker for each team. So if it was Rob, then it would not be Ray Agnew. But you're really playing the 3D chess game by bringing that up. But Agnew is very, very, very experienced in the NFL, and with 2 organizations that have had to build. The Rams, he was there before they found, all the talent that they had. It helped that they got Jared Goff as a successful top draft pick and then traded him for another successful starting quarterback, but they really had to build a team. in Los Angeles. They were a mess under Jeff Fisher. And so they built that team up. They built the Lions up from the dirt. And it is a team that, both those squads kind of went to the bottom at one point. And, I don't think the Wilfs are ever going to accept that, but maybe someone with a longer term vision, a year over year type of way of looking at it, as opposed to, oh my gosh, we're really good. Now what do we do? Spend all the money. Which, look, last offseason leading up to it, it made a lot of sense to do. It made a lot of sense to spend a lot of money around JJ McCarthy, to chips to the middle of the table, rookie quarterback contract. It's worked before. But when you make 5 or 6 decisions that on day one of that decision, you go, okay, I see it, but is that the right investment? Is that the right amount of money you should be spending on that guy? Is that a player coming off an injury who hasn't produced in 2 or 3 years? Or is that someone you should really be keeping at that dollar figure? You want someone who's going to manage it a little more methodically than as opposed to reactionary. So Ray Agnew, I think, would understand that when you're with multiple excellent organizations, you bring along a certain amount of credibility with that. Dennis, what time frame do you think that we're expecting for a GM decision? So I saw Jonathan Jones of CBS kind of toss it out there where there's some league meetings coming up. Those are ones that I don't know, we usually don't go to. Sometimes Mark Wilfs talks at them, but usually it's not like a big media event. So there's some league meetings. There's Memorial Day. Maybe after that is when they'll get candidates in for meetings and such, and then make a decision. But I mean, I don't know. They haven't sent us a schedule. I would just guess that they would want to get this done maybe before minicamp. But the way that things work out is just in general, you have your minicamp in the middle of June or early June, and then everybody's off for 6 weeks. And then the whole season starts with training camp. Maybe you want to get the person in for just a little taste of, here's your roster. Here's what it looks like for a couple practices. Here's what the building's like. Here's how you use the elevator or whatever, like the different stuff like that. Get that person a little bit comfortable before real things start happening. That would make sense to me, but I don't know exactly. Usually these teams are on a very serious time crunch. It's like, we just fired our GM. We got to hire a new one. 2 or 3 weeks later, bang. But they don't really have to feel too pressured when the season doesn't start for a while and you have to make decisions on players in training camp. So that's a ways out. You don't have many roster decisions to make now. I would like to see them maybe get an outside linebacker to help, but that's really it. So, yeah, I mean, Goblin says probably at the end of the month. That would make the most sense to me. Jay, do you think that Rob Brzezinski can say a hard no in future drafts? I think he could have about a center during this year's draft. Well, I don't really understand that. So I'm on the fence about Rob B for the future. You mean that he could have demanded that they draft a center? Well, they're not going to do that under any GM. Like Eric DeCosta talked about this from the Rams. Any GM is not going to reach from what they think their draft boards say about a certain position. And he admitted that they got a little bit fooled on the centers where they thought they were going to go in the 3rd round and they went in the 2nd. And they were taken aback by that when Logan Jones and Jake Slaughter went. And it was clear that the league had those two way above someone like Sam Hecht, who was kind of tossed out there as another guy who could be drafted that high. So I guess it reads like you wanted him to sort of pound the table to get a center. Rob in the draft room. Now, if they hire one of these general managers and not Rob and make him the president of the team and give him final say or whatever, he's not going to come in as a salary cap guy through his entire career and say, sorry, scouts, sorry, acting GM or GM, next GM, we are drafting this guy. Like, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to be about operating, overseeing the whole process in the draft and working with directly the general manager through that. But the next GM is going to be a scout person who's done this for a long time, who's been in many draft rooms and has gone through that process a lot. And they're going to set boards and they're going to draft off their boards And it's probably not going to be very different from the way that it was done during Spielman or any other place in the NFL. Like there's only so many different ways to, draft. Look at this. We've got Devon Achane. This is a little small breaking news that has nothing to do with the Vikings, but Devon Achane reached a contract extension with the Dolphins. So I guess that means, even though that idea was already long gone, I guess it's like extra long gone now. But the point about, Rob and the GM is that they're going to work together, but the GM is going to be there to run that draft process, and they'll make the decisions on should you draft this guy or that guy. But Rob, with his background, wouldn't be the one to do that. And I think you might want a GM who says, this is the way we're going because I say so. You want that kind of final say situation, but they're going to run the entire process. Where I would be curious for the next GM is if there was disagreement with the coaches. If the next GM, because they ran into this with Zimmer and Spielman in that 2021 draft that really started to sour their relationship because they had gotten along really well building the teams before. And then in 2021, it was Wyatt Davis, it was Chaz Surratt, it was Kellen Mond, and I think it was the Mond pick where Zimmer walked out of the room. Like, is the next GM going to be willing to say, hey, Brian Flores, I know you like this player, but I'm not overdrafting him here? And do you have that credibility and that authority to be able to do that? That's kind of the question. Jarrell says the offense will have more success than the defense this season, but defense will be absolutely no slouch. That might be true if Kyler is able to perform at the peak level of Kyler, which they're going to give him everything they possibly can to do that. And in terms of the defense, on paper right now, they should decline a bit. But I also think that when we look at this schedule tomorrow, that we're going to go, I don't think that there's as much scary there as there's been in some previous seasons. Last year was a pretty tough schedule that they faced overall. And the North is going to be tough, but Atlanta's quarterback situation, Miami's, the Jets, there's a lot of teams that, even Baker Mayfield or Tyler Shuck, there's either unproven or just flat out not that great. A lot of quarterback situations in the NFL going against the Vikings, and they have now 9 home games, 1 neutral site, and 7 road, which I think helps them a lot defensively to have more home games. So I don't know, Flores always seems to find a way. You look at last year, they had all the injuries they had, and they still kind of found a way. But I agree with you that on paper, especially if Harry's not there, that there should be some regression. I just wouldn't expect enormous. If you can end up somewhere between 8 and 12 in the league in offense and defense, and you have the best kicker in Will Reichard, you should be right in the mix for the playoffs. Bryson, thank you so much for the enormous super chat. Really appreciate that. Says you live in Georgia, wouldn't have nearly the insight in the Vikings. That's great. Great to hear, Bryson. I really appreciate. I have a lot of people that listen all over, sometimes different countries and all over the country that are Vikings fans, and it means a lot that you guys want to listen. And thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate that very much, Bryson. Jay says Rob Brzezinski needs to be able to have a hard no during future drafts. Oh, I see you're saying that's what you're saying. But do you think Rob is too nice? No, I don't know why you think Rob wanted a center like you did, but I don't think during the draft, no matter what structure, Rob is going to say hard no unless it comes down to trading draft picks. If they were in a situation where they said, we're going to trade a first rounder in the future to move up 5 spots to take this guy because we love him so much. That's where, if Rob is the president, he could step in and say, look, this is just not a good use of our assets. So I don't believe that we should do this. And if there was a battle over it, he would win out. That's the structure that I want to see. I want him to be able to say that. But in terms of we must draft this, that's not what Rob's going to be. He's going to oversee, but he's not going to be that guy who's telling the new GM with the however many years, 20 years of scouting background, which is what most of these guys have, somewhere between 10 and 20 years of scouting background. He's not going to be telling them, oh, sorry, you need to draft a center. Like, that's just, it's not going to work that way. Those guys are here for that. They are here to improve this team's drafting with their scouting and drafting experience. That's the idea of having all these AGMs who came up in the scouting world on their list to interview. Alex, the flight to Mexico City and Santa Clara to Minnesota is about the same distance. Mexico's still Central Time rather than Pacific Time, so it really benefits the Vikings. Yeah, I know. When it's an international game, there's a natural, like we've been saying, overseas forever, but it's like it's just over land. They don't have to travel over a sea. I guess Central Time should help a little. I mean, look, the way that teams travel now in the NFL, it's kind of been long known in the FanDuel type worlds that the home field advantage has drifted a bit in previous years. I think it still exists at US Bank Stadium for Brian Flores' defense, but just in general, like, teams are so good at traveling. Guys are so good at managing their bodies, their sleep, all that sort of stuff, that it's been mitigated kind of quite a bit. So I don't know how much edge you get from playing in Mexico City, but you don't have to have their crowd. That's the biggest thing, is that you don't have, if there's anything that does, and we saw this in 2020, if there's anything that still does make a difference, it's crowd noise. And San Francisco's got a great fan base. It's not always been the easiest place for the Vikings to play. So having it in Mexico City for them against a hard opponent, I do agree. I think it benefits them, of course, a lot more than it does San Francisco. Jarrell, interested to see the cornerbacks this season. Pass rush will be there. It's up the secondary. I mean, corners for me is pretty well set for 1 and 2, Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy Jr. And luckily for the Vikings, they stayed healthy last year, which was extremely helpful to the defense. If they do again, we may see a little bit of Chuck Demmings. We may see a little bit of, James Pierre may play more than he's ever played before. That's kind of a typical Flores type of move of, hey, this guy's never played 400 snaps, but he's playing 600 for us. That's happened a lot. I'm just more interested in the safety position when it comes to how is Jay Ward going to step up? Where is Jacoby Thomas going to fit in? Because it's not that unusual to draft a safety in the 3rd round. If you missed the episode with Cody Alexander the other day, he brought this up. Like, Jacoby Thomas might start. I mean, it's not that crazy. This happened with Xavier Watts last year, and Atlanta's just sort of comes right to mind. But if you draft a safety in the 3rd round, they might end up starting. So is he going to play with Jay Ward back there, or Josh Metellus back there? And Metellus is not a big nickel anymore, and James Pierre plays more. Like, that structure is absolutely fascinating. Time zone take. We do have time zone takes here. Yeah, I mean, I guess Alex said that Mexico City is in the same time zone as Minnesota. I've never looked into it. I've never had the thought of what time zone Mexico City is in. So if he's wrong, someone let me know. Let's see. Kit. Very curious to see if Rob Brzezinski is happy returning to his previous GM role if they go another way at GM. I mean, I guess assuming that he does, if they don't make him the president of the team or whatever other role, first of all, it's a really good job. It's not a job that you would want to give up, like working salary cap and, so forth, and overseeing stuff for a franchise trying to win a Super Bowl and everything every day. It's a pretty good gig to have. So I don't think, with all the things Rob has been through with the Vikings, that he is going to flip a table and whatever if he has to go back to what he was doing before. It was always acting GM, interim GM. There was no guarantees or anything, but I think he's deserving of having the higher position. I think that what really impressed me this year was it takes a lot of leadership ability to not have the full-time GM job and operate through the way that you want to operate. Because it would be, I think, very easy to say, I'm just the acting GM, and even though I've been here a long time, I just kind of do what everybody else wants to do. And I think he really took command of the steering wheel and said, this is the way I think is the best way to operate for the long term of the Minnesota Vikings franchise, and did it. So that was really impressive. But, I don't think he's going to he's an adult. He's a grown person. I think it'll be fine if he works. And plus, a lot of these people, he probably already knows a lot of these people, especially someone like Terrence Gray or Reed Burkhart, who he would have worked with before. So I don't think it would be a shock. I just feel like the credibility he's built up over the years and the skill set that he has works really well to the arms race that is NFL roster building, because it's an arms race of, can you manage your assets the best and can you evaluate the best? And where a lot of evaluation in the draft has been pretty similar and mostly historically based on just what draft picks you have and how lucky you got, I do think that in the future, or we're kind of there now, but it's going to continue that way. It's who can use all the resources. And I don't just mean be an analytics team. I mean every resource that you can, not just scout the players, but understand your own scouting reports, understanding what correlates to success. I mean, there's just way more resources now to look at and build these data sets on. And I don't just mean, well, runs this fast or has this PFF grade. I mean data sets as in your own scouting reports, that those can be studied in a very data-driven type of way. And so your decision-making process, along with your asset management, like those are the edges in this league. And the Vikings, it didn't feel like the only time I felt like the Vikings had an advantage was in 2023 when they tore apart a 13-win team, because they looked into the future and said, if we sign all these people and keep all these people, it is going to really hinder us into the future. And so not extending Kirk at a huge dollar figure and so forth. I thought at that point, okay, Kwesi is doing the thing that Rick couldn't do, and this is right. But then they didn't back it up with success in the draft, and they did have a huge free agency, but then didn't have the next free agency go as well. And that's how we ended up here. But I did think that was at one point smart asset management. I think Rob is extremely, extremely good at that. And that's an edge for your franchise. Taslios says, what's happening at PFF that you keep commenting about them not being around? So Teamworks is a company that works with, it's kind of like their name. They work with teams, and they purchased PFF after PFF had some issues. And that's kind of outlined in my book of how they got there. And a lot of people left, and it kind of was thrown into disarray for a few years there. So Teamworks bought them, and a lot of people lost their jobs on the content side. Trevor Sikkema, who was on the show the other day, he has the NFL Stock Exchange, great podcast, but not working at PFF anymore. Max Chadwick and his podcast. So a lot of people on that side, and they brought over the data collectors to Teamworks to continue that side, which works for teams. All 32 teams work with PFF, and they use all the data that their huge network of former players, former coaches, and people who have been trained on their system to collect that data. So all teams use it. They have a system that's different than anything you can see, where they can look at, let's say down and distance and all the numbers of who played, where they played. All teams use this at every single game plan, but it now belongs to Teamworks. So I don't know if they're going to continue with a public product. I've been told that they plan to, but I don't know. So if we lose the premium stats and the grades and everything else, that would be a whole heck of a lot of data that I've used for many years and have kind of really become very comfortable with the strengths and weaknesses when it comes to evaluating the Vikings, and the things that I could point out about how different players were used and where they had success or where they struggled or whatever. I don't know if it's going to continue to be out there for us to use. And if it's not, then we'll have to work on different data sources to evaluate, and things like that. So I have found it over the years to be invaluable in terms of my own understanding of just what to look for. When players have good or bad PFF grades, we don't just go, well, it's a good PFF grade, so it's all set. It's like, what can we learn from this about why that player is succeeding or why they're struggling? So we will see. Son of Beavers, if KOC loses to the Jets, I'm sure he's going to get fired. I don't know. I think the Jets can be a lot more successful this year, a lot more competitive this year. They brought in veteran players. They drafted a lot of talent. They have a competitive quarterback. I mean, if things are going off the rails, but you know this, I mean, any team can lose. The Vikings lost to Cooper Rush one time. Any team can lose a game. The Vikings lost to a winless Detroit Lions, although you would probably say that did result in someone getting fired. But I don't know. Like, I just think the Jets are quite a bit better than they were last year. So we're writing in an easy W. I think it might be a little harder than that. Norris, how did the Patriots improve after all the coaching distractions? They might have a new head coach. They will not have a new head coach. I would be like, you could come, Norris Force, you're here a lot. You ask great questions, great comments. I give you full permission to dunk on my face if I'm wrong about this. But stuff happens like this all the time in the National Football League. And over the years, heard about this or heard about that or whatever. That's an open secret with everybody, except for it doesn't make its way out to the public. The biggest difference here is just that it was an NFL reporter. That's where it's pretty shocking. Like, wait a minute, this person was putting out all sorts of reports, and now we have photos of them doing this, or, evidence of them being there for whatever number of reports that came out. Like, that's crazy. But other stuff, like distractions, off-field things, comes into play all the time behind the scenes in the NFL, and people don't walk away from their jobs for it. I don't see much chance that Mike Vrabel says, well, TMZ has caught me, unless there's something crazy. But now TMZ is putting out, hey, they were at this like 5 years ago and someone snapped a picture. Okay, like I think the story is completely run out of steam. It's very salacious. It's gotten a lot of attention and is kind of like, wow, can you believe this was happening? But I don't think it impacts the football at all. And in fact, if you listen to the Patriots players who've been asked about it, they act like he was victimized or something. Like, we've all got his back. We're all behind him in this tough time. It's like, tough time. The guy was, anyway, I have a tough time myself seeing this have any impact. And I will say, though, that baked into the improvement is this report that they're going to get A.J. Brown. And there's been Schefter and Rossini, when she was an NFL insider, reporting that this trade is essentially wrapped up and they just have to wait till June 1st. So if they get A.J. Brown, he is an upgrade probably on Stephon Diggs. They've added to their weapons. They've added to their offensive line depth with drafting Lomu. So I think that they've gotten better. They were also not very high on my list. Like, I don't think they've gotten way better. So they were just kind of like in the middle. A.J. Brown does move the needle. And, for the Vikings, he's been a killer. He's been so hard to go against for the Vikings, including crushing them last year. So that's why they're on the list of Vikings improved, teams, because it's through the lens of the Vikings playing them. The Magic Scientist, does Jennings make it more or less likely we see a June 1st Addison trade to Buffalo for Coleman in a second? Sounds nice to me. I don't think there's any chance on this earth that, okay, and you too. You can come back. Feel free to dunk on my face if it happens. I don't think that there is any chance in this universe that the Minnesota Vikings trade Jordan Addison. Not now. They have built a good team around Kyler Murray. They need to find out if Kyler can be their future franchise guy, and they're trying to win the division. So you're not trading Jordan Addison just because he got thrown out of a casino at 4:00 in the morning early in the offseason. That's just not happening. They've forgiven him for much worse. I mean, the actual reports or whatever that came out from this thing sound like something that happens at every casino in the United States, probably a couple times a night. So, yeah, I mean, they're not going, oh, well, you had that, so now we're trading you. And for a second round draft pick and a terrible wide receiver, no, they're trying to win games. KOC needs to win a playoff game, and he's going to do it with Jordan Addison. He's not going to do it without him. This guy he's caped for Jordan Addison this entire time. He's the one that said, we're going to wrap our arms around him and everything else. Like, he has always been at the forefront to defend Jordan Addison. They're not going to move him at this point. Now, if they get to the end of this year and are disappointed with the results and feel like off-field things are impacting that, then we could be talking about a different story. Snidely sees Kyler as third best in the NFC North. I think that's fair. As you guys know, and I think you can appreciate, Jared Goff perpetually deeply underappreciated in the NFL, consistently leads top 5 offenses. Overall last year was phenomenal, and their defense completely fell apart. Their offensive line fell apart, but flawed. See, that's the thing with quarterback analysis. Like, if you're flawed, to a lot of people, you just are terrible garbage who should never even try to throw a football. That's how it's treated. If you are not a perfect quarterback, or if you have a kryptonite, you shouldn't even try. You should just retire. And that's how they treat Jared Goff. But the times he's played the Vikings with good pass protection, he's been really, really good. When he hasn't, he has been not good. And that was the case in both games last year, where they didn't protect him very well and Flores ate him up. But when they did protect him well, Flores struggled to get to Goff, and we saw how good he was able to be. I think, career-wise, he has been a phenomenal NFL quarterback. He's gone to the Super Bowl. He's gone to the NFC Championship. He's had a 15-win season. I mean, my gosh, if that guy does not, and he was a top draft pick. I honestly don't even, it's because he doesn't run, and everyone wants people to run, and I get that. But man, you got one flaw, and it's like, just, you are terrible. Get rid of him. Don't even, like, man, Jared Goff's been a great quarterback for 2 franchises. Anyway, and I think that trade made a lot of people think, well, Jared Goff's not any good. They traded for an incredible quarterback, and Goff got even better when he got to Detroit. So I'll always defend him. The wild card here, Norse Force has Goff as the top quarterback of the NFC North, then Murray, then Caleb Williams, then Jordan Love. There's just a lot of questions there about Caleb Williams, because if you told me Caleb was 1st or 4th next year in the NFC North, I'd say, okay, I believe you. If he doesn't get better, all those end of games are not going to happen. But if he does, then everyone's in trouble. If he gets better at the straight up execution from a play-to-play basis rather than just the playmaking, Kyler and Caleb are similar in some ways. Kyler's way more accurate. Caleb's much bigger than Kyler Murray, but I mean, he's not enormous. He's like, what? Is he like 6'1" or something? So I guess he's still undersized, but he's bigger than Kyler Murray, and is younger, and is super fast, and I think a much better thrower on the move than Kyler is at this point in his career. Like, he does so much of his work there. They're very different. They're all very different. Jordan Love has the athleticism to run, but doesn't ever do it. It's just a straight up pocket quarterback who lives and dies on whether his deep balls are landing in wide receivers' hands and those high risk type of throws. So he has a lot of variance even within a season. I think Kyler does too, because Kyler relies on, like Jared or like Caleb Williams. That's why it's a good discussion. Like, they're all very different. Goff relies on pass protection. Murray relies on making big plays with his escapability. So does Caleb. And then Love relies on those deep shots. And whoever is the one where all that's clicking is the best at that given time. I think that race could change 4 different times through a season, who people think is the best in the NFC North. Alexander says Bears confirmed to play week 1 at Carolina. Okay. Pick the game. Okay. Well, I think Carolina's gotten a lot better on defense specifically. They made the playoffs and not a good defense. But if you want me to pick that game specifically, I guess I would go Carolina to beat the Bears there, because I just don't, this is what baffles me. I just don't see how the Bears are going to pressure any quarterback. And with Tet McMillan taking another step, adding Chris Brazzell, I know it's a mid-round pick, but I think he's a talented young receiver. They've got some other guys, Jalen Coker, who's been improving. They've got a decent run game. They've built a good offensive line. They're going to protect Bryce Young, and he's going to be, I think, free to drop back and throw against that team. So I'll go Carolina. But I actually love this bit. If you guys want to do that, hey, when the schedule comes out, pick this random game. I'd love to do that. Nano Joe, the QB carousel never ends with this team. It's guaranteed some BS will happen during the season with the QBs. Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not, man. We've had every different version. It's crazy because if, just for example, like, go back 10 years, Sam Bradford got murdered in 2016, just killed. The terrible tackles, bad offensive line. He got hit left and right, stayed healthy the whole season, never missed any time. 2017, I don't even remember anyone hitting him, and he's out for the year. Who knows? And then Case Keenum is great, right? And Sam Darnold was supposed to start for 3 or 4 weeks and then turn it over to J.J. McCarthy, then wins 14. And you're right that even when you say some BS, like it could just mean, it could mean Kyler's great. Like just some stuff that you never see coming, or the league never sees coming, or whatever. It's guaranteed to never be normal with the Vikings. But would you be surprised at all if J.J. McCarthy ended up playing 5 games? That's my whole point about McCarthy is stay ready, man, because it wouldn't be a shock if you end up playing quite a bit this year if you earn that job. But if you can't beat out Carson Wentz, you're not going to play. So yeah, it's pretty much a guarantee that something happens that we don't expect. I would agree with that. Sean says water cooler chat today with my Bears coworker was to get used to watching big citrus forklift Bradbury into Caleb Williams both games this year. Well, Caleb is a little bit better at escaping than maybe Kirk Cousins was, just as we saw Drake May get to the Super Bowl with Garrett Bradbury. So it'll be a little bit less there. But the defensive line for the Vikings interior, incredibly fascinating with how they change the game against some of these opponents, as you're mentioning. Even if they're inexperienced, just raw power is way different. Going up against a interior of the line for the Detroit Lions, it's quite a bit different. For the Packers, that was underwhelming. For the Bears that lose one of their best players, it's a totally different thing. And I did kind of throw you guys a little bit of a juke there when I said on the FanDuel question of the day, I kind of turned it toward Justin Jefferson a little bit. But you know, I like that discussion though of where you guys rank the NFC North, because I did want to get it in there that Justin Jefferson is still being thought of fairly highly at plus 1,700 for Offensive Player of the Year. And Kyler Murray has just not played with a guy like this in many years. So I think when we do the who's the best quarterback in the NFC North, the thing is with ranking quarterbacks is you can't take the context out of it. It can't be, well, you know, if they all went out on a field and threw to the same exact receivers and they had the same exact offensive line, what would it look like? Like Kyler Murray has new circumstances. So whatever he's done before doesn't exactly predict what he's going to do now. It's not Cliff Kingsbury coaching him. It's not Marvin Harrison Jr. running wrong routes. This is Jefferson and Addison and Hockenson and Juwan Jennings. These are pros. These are proven wide receivers. So it's quite a bit different of a scenario, which is why I would bump up Murray, but gosh, where do you put him versus these other quarterbacks? I mean, I think he has the capability. I think they all have the capability under the right situation to be the best. I think he has the capability to be the best quarterback in the NFC North, but it's hard to deny how good Jared Goff has been consistently. I would probably put Goff number 1, and then with Caleb Williams, if he plays exactly the same, he's probably number 3 or 4. But if he plays like he is Josh Allen taking the big year 3 step, then he could easily be number 1. There's a lot there. Planet Yevon, there is McCarthy is still a kid. Might be too much to ask for a person so young to be aware enough to appreciate the growth opportunity presented to him. You know, I think that is a good point, but in pro sports, you have to figure it out quick. And I hope that, you know, McCarthy has good people around him, because you know that the team's going to be sending this message to him, and you know that his teammates are going to be sending the message to him exactly what I'm saying, which is you are nowhere near the end of your, as KOC says, quarterback journey, but you are nowhere near the end of your career. It is just starting. And the number of players who have had their first time out not work out the way it's supposed to is immense at the quarterback position. But the thing is, it just was so much in the limelight. There was national TV games, and there was, you know, against the Packers, meltdown against the Bears. You know, I know that was a special teams play at the end, but he did not play well at all. And, you just had so much pressure and so much discussion about the Sam Darnold thing. If you can make it through that and come back and have a good attitude about your growth opportunity as Kyler Murray's backup quarterback and understand that you probably are going to get in the game at some point, then he could become a better QB pretty quickly because the talent is obviously there. The skill set is there. The thing about JJ McCarthy, I think that everyone got wrong, and I'm going to include the Minnesota Vikings about this, is that he was much more of a raw prospect with really, really good tools than he was a pro QB game manager. He was talked about coming out as if he was going to be able to just manage games and then make the occasional play. And I fully believe the Vikings thought that this was what it was going to look like and what he was going to do. And when he actually got there, it was much more, okay, like he's a wild man. He's trying to make plays all over the place. He's pushing the ball down the field like crazy. He's running all over and getting hurt. Like this looks like a young, raw prospect, not the polished game manager who won the national championship in Michigan, but Michigan is not the National Football League. So I think that's what everybody kind of missed, which means you need to take a step back and like you need to smooth this out, the rough edges, before he goes back out there again. And they may very well need him to do that. And he needs to understand to himself that it's going to be progress for him if he puts in the right work and has the right attitude about it. And if he doesn't, then Carson Wentz will be QB2. And I know that KOC probably very spooked by what happened over, the 2023 season and last year with all the quarterback injuries. I'm sure desperately wanted Carson Wentz to come back. Like, let's make sure we got 3 of these guys, not some UDFA who's going to be tossed in there. But I also think that it's, if JJ does not have the right approach to this and does not show improvement, we need to have a real backup quarterback. Aaron says, who do you think will be the next few guys to get contract extensions for the Vikings? That's going to be a big decision that the next general manager has to make, which is, are you extending? Blake Cashman would be very high on my list. Brian O'Neill is the toughest one because Brian O'Neill is not only just a great Viking. I mean, it's been one of the best Vikings offensive linemen of the last 25 years. When you look at the resume, how many games he's played, the Pro Bowls, all those things. Like, he's been a great offensive lineman, but he's also been a great leader in the locker room, great ambassador for the team. He's the first guy to step up when things go wrong, to be ready to talk and that kind of thing. I mean, he's really been a leader for them by example. He's as hard as working as you get. It's everything that you want. Like, that is as home run draft pick as you can get for the Vikings in the second round, 2018. And he's become this. You want him on your team, but age and price are real things. And if you get to a point where you're past 30 years old, teams kind of have to approach it year to year with everyone just because it's football and people wear down. And I think if you're the Vikings, ideally, what you'd like to do is just wait on this, like see where he's at. I mean, does he stay healthy for the entire year? Because if there's more injuries, you'd be pretty concerned about giving him an extension. And you also have to consider just the price tag between he and Darisaw. Can you pay $60 million on the salary cap or whatever it's going to be for your offensive tackles? Like, it's just a lot. If you maybe need to pay a quarterback like Kyler Murray or, somebody else who comes in that's available in 2027, that's a veteran, it becomes a little bit tricky. I think Cashman, he has had some injuries, but that's one where you could give a 2 or 3 year contract extension, feel pretty good about it. I don't know that there's anybody else other than Isaiah Rodgers, who, if you're Isaiah Rodgers, you're probably not doing it right now. What you'd like to do if you're Rodgers, my guess is have another really good season and then tell the team, I want $20 million per year. Because if you did it right now with Rodgers, it's actually the right time to do an extension with Rodgers. Give him a 3-year contract extension worth, I don't know, $15 million, $14 million a year, somewhere in that range. And if he takes that, then that's a pretty good deal for you. But if he has a great season and hits the open market, I mean, he could push $20 million. Maybe with his background, there might be some hesitation about that. So maybe that's overshooting, but look at what Byron Murphy got. And that's been a very good corner in the league, but there's just, when it comes to corners in free agency, there's a lot of guys who can play and could start, but there's not a lot of really good players. So they get money. Maybe I'm going too high on some of the numbers there, probably, but like, could they offer him 10 or 11? And then maybe if he hits free agency and has a great year, it's 15. But I mean, what if he gets like 5 or 6 picks? I don't know. That happened with Murphy 2 years ago, and then he got the bag. So I guess that's kind of really the list right now of players that you'd be talking about for extensions. Mike says the water cooler chat right now is, can Brandel be good? Can rookies anchor a solid run defense, and will the secondary improve? And the minor issue of a viable quarterback. Optimistic chat. While you and your friends are, you're hardcore. I mean, if you guys are talking of whether the center can do it, then you are very serious football group chat friends or water cooler friends. Well, let me help one at a time. So with Brandel, I think that can he do it? Can he be good? I think he could be fine. Serviceable. I think in terms of a leader of an offense, Brandel is definitely the guy you want there because he knows the offense inside and out. So he's with Keith Carter last year. He's been in this offense for a long time. He knows the language. He knows the checks, and he can help Kyler Murray a lot. So I think there's an intellectual element that's really big for center that Brandel is going to be fine. I think he can move bodies because he's strong and he's nimble enough to have been a former offensive tackle, even in the NFL at times. So he's got some athleticism to him, even if he's not a great athlete technically, like on paper. But the expectation being set any higher than fine is maybe that would be very optimistic. I think he could be okay. If he finished, this is why like we think of things through these kind of PFF grade terms, but if he finished in the top 15 in pass blocking and top 20 in run blocking, well, then that's great. Like the price you paid for him, and Lloyd Cushenberry probably wasn't going to do any different if you got him in free agency. So that should be okay. Can the rookies anchor a solid run defense is a huge question, because asking Dominique Orange to be, hey, kid, rookie, step in and just be the guy there. It's a big ask, and they haven't gone out and gotten another DT other than, was it Eric Johnson, who's just kind of been a guy who's played like 400 snaps for Indy, but they haven't gotten anyone of consequence at defensive tackle in free agency. I wonder after June 1st if maybe they consider finding one other person, but it might be a lot of Levi Drake Rodriguez this year, who's taken some huge steps over the last couple seasons. Jalen Redmond is a surprisingly good run defender for somebody who's not the biggest guy, because he sheds blocks and gets into the backfield. But it's a big ask for Orange. And where, Caleb Banks comes into this is also kind of interesting, because Caleb Banks was not a good run defender in college. But I think if he's in the right position, I saw for whatever reason people arguing about the 4-eye versus 3 technique on the internet today. I'm not sure what happened. I just scrolling and I saw that. But that 4, if you don't like, the techniques are just positions that people line up on the defensive line. So the 5 is like over the tackle. The 4-eye is a little inside the tackle, that kind of thing. But it's basically the 3-4 defensive end is how you would know it. That's a little bit of a different spot for Caleb Banks than lining up like right over the guard or right over the center. So if Caleb Banks is in a kind of a position to move bodies there and allow more for Eric Wilson, for Blake Cashman, for Josh Metellus, I think that they can manage there, even though they're pretty young. And then you have guys with some experience, but I did think that they were going to bring in one more guy. Will the secondary improve? Is hard without Harrison Smith. It's just hard to be better than they were before. Jacoby Thomas would have to step in right away. I think that's my biggest concern right now is will the defensive backs be as good as they've been before? James Pierre definitely helps, but it's not like a huge needle mover. That would be, last year they had some struggles when Harrison Smith was out. The minor issue of the viable quarterback, we've definitely talked a lot about. Norse Force says, how's there a quarterback competition when McCarthy can't hit the side of a barn and Murray's tossed over 4,000 yards, been in the MVP race? McCarthy probably traded before the season starts. So I don't see that. I don't see him being traded unless there's a different vibe from him, unless they get to a point where he is very unhappy. He's QB3. He's demanding a trade. But even then, I don't think you have to do it because who's trading for him right now? There's a reason why Anthony Richardson is still in Indianapolis because no one's willing to give up anything for that. If the Vikings want to trade McCarthy, the best thing for that would probably to get him in a couple of games or have him light up a preseason game. But I don't think they want to bail on JJ McCarthy yet because here's what we know about quarterback. We don't know anything about quarterback. That's what we know, right? We were just talking about Case Keenum and Sam Bradford and Sam Darnold. We don't know anything about what a quarterback's going to do, not just for the Vikings, just in general. Like, these things are so up and down. Sam Darnold is your Super Bowl champion quarterback. If I told you that 2 years ago, you would have laughed hysterically and said you're a moron. But he is the Super Bowl champion quarterback. So things can change quickly with guys who get laughed at and made fun of and everything else because they struggle. Not saying that McCarthy's going to win the Super Bowl for them, but from a front office perspective, why would you give up? Like, he's under contract for your team. Go practice and go play as hard as you can and see what happens for McCarthy. He truly did struggle with accuracy, probably as much as I've ever seen an NFL quarterback struggle with accuracy. And when that happens, the odds of your success go down enormously. If your completion percentages, it's a certain mark. If your turnovers, interceptions, sack are at a certain mark, you don't have a great chance to succeed. And I think that's fair to look at it that way with McCarthy. But we've seen guys with worse or just as bad turn it around. So I don't think that it would be a good idea to bail on McCarthy. Rather just see how it plays out first. Shaq said, would it be a bad look if Darnold goes back to the Super Bowl and wins it? I actually don't think the look can get worse. Shaq, I don't think I truly don't believe that you could get worse than winning the Super Bowl. I guess winning 2 would make it worse because if he wins 1 and then goes 9-8 or something this year and drops off the side of the table, you could be like, well, but no, you can't really. Your franchise hasn't been to the Super Bowl since the 70s and has won 3 playoff games over the last, 25 years, and you gave away the Super Bowl winning quarterback. You can't look worse than that. No, I don't think you can. Even if he wins it again, it's like, well, you were already at 0, so can't go any lower. You've already hit the rock bottom by allowing the Super Bowl winning quarterback who played incredibly well in the playoffs overall to walk out. So the Magic Scientist, what veteran free agents you think for Edge 3? So we were looking at this the other day, and the name that I like the most is a guy that I've seen him tweet a couple of times, and seems like he thinks that more teams should be interested than they are. Is Kyle Van Noy is an interesting name for me because he hasn't been amazing in recent years, but he's been still pretty good, and he's been a long time good NFL player. And has played for teams that are in this 3-4 system, like the Baltimore Ravens and the New England Patriots. So I like that as a 30-something-year-old veteran to come in and play, 350 to 400 snaps. And if someone gets hurt, he can be a backup there. You could go AJ Epinesa, who's still out there if you want a little more of a traditional type of defensive end to mix in. Jihad Ward is still out there. Jihad is an interesting character who has bounced around a little bit, but he was actually legitimately useful for the Tennessee Titans last year. So I don't know. Any one of those guys could come in. There's nobody that's going to make some crazy impact, but they definitely need one more person, I think. Jay Mulls, so true about Ryan Vandemark, very underrated signing that no one will talk about, but can become very important and much improved overall offensive lineman because of it, plus Tiernan too. That's the thing is, offensive line depth. There is not a analyst out there that I've ever heard say when they're doing a TV hit or something like that, You know what this team did? They improved O-line 6 and O-line 7, and that's why I'm buying them. But you know what? O-line 6 and O-line 7, they get in the game. They matter. And we saw that last year. They went with Justin School, who actually, we just hammered him early in the season, and it was pretty rough. Later on, when he got some real starts, he was actually fine. But I mean, some of those games where he had to be thrown in, he was just not up for it. Vandermark is a big dude, and Tiernan too. I think School is one of those guys that worked really, really hard and is very smart and has maximized every ounce of physicality that he has. So if someone's quicker than him, he's just done. I don't think that's true for Tiernan and Vandermark. So they've gotten better there, and some positional flexibility potentially on Tiernan. Guard, backup guard, I'm a little bit sus on, and center, but we'll have to see how that kind of plays out. Last year we did talk about Walter Rouse being a guard. I wonder if we see that after they've added these tackles, if he's going to be a guard from the start of training camp, because they wanted that, or we had heard that they wanted that last year, and then it never really came to fruition. So I'll be curious if that happens this time around. Okay. Contra Paston says, Lions fan, Ray Agnew is a good dude, would be happy for the picks. Vikings fans are too kind-hearted to pull a Falcons on us. Oh, yeah, well, it's not up to them. It would be up to the league. And just the way that the structure happens, yeah, it would be up to the league. But your point on Ray Agnew, I saw a lot of Lions reporters and people saying that he would be an enormous loss. It's clear that he's been a big role player in them building their team, and they built a great team. And it's another one that stockpiled draft capital. Why was Brad Holmes so genius? I don't know. When you have like 5 picks out of the first 50, you got a good chance to hit on some of them. So maybe if that's a Ray Agnew thing, then, it'll work out. Bryson, I did see your super chat. It just took me a long time to get there. So hopefully you're still watching and you saw that. But don't be afraid. Sometimes with the chat, I just get behind because I talk too much. That's why we end up with really long streams, is because I get way behind, and then, it takes me a little while. So you got to stick with me, but I appreciate it, man. Dirty Mike, I don't know how you can look at the last 20 years of this organization and think that maintaining the status quo is going to work. We need sweeping changes. The inability of our franchise to find a long-term answer at quarterback, not exclusively bad luck. When you never draft high and never take a swing at Lamar, Jalen Hurts type, your odds are minuscule. I agree with you. I agree with you on most points there. I think that the sweeping changes point doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be that they hire a GM and he fires every scout that they have. There is belief, and I know that this is hard to wrap your head around because they've drafted so bad. There's belief around the NFL that the Vikings have a very strong front office overall. And the issue has been, and would continue to be if they were going to continue to trade draft picks, that if you don't have enough of them and you don't draft high, then the odds just really are not in your favor. You're fighting an uphill battle there. And that wasn't the only reason. There were some bad process picks during Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. And I think that that's the biggest thing that they want to change with the next hire is, how do you maximize what you have for draft capital? Because you probably won't be drafting number 1 overall, but you are right though, Mike, you are right. If you don't take shots at the Lamar and the Jalen Hurts, both of which they could have drafted, and the Jalen Hurts one I think is much worse because you had just signed Kirk to a multi-year deal that paid more guaranteed money. And that would have been kind of crazy to draft Lamar. It was just one of those theoretical things that, yeah, you should have done. Jalen Hurts though, the Vikings weren't even good when he came out in the draft. They weren't even they were good in 2019, but they were not projecting good. They had just lost a bunch of stuff in the offseason. They had just traded Stephon Diggs. They were not a good roster. And they were a team that clearly was in a good position to draft and develop the next quarterback. And you could say what you want about Jalen Hurts, but he's been to 2 Super Bowls and has a ring and is the MVP. So I don't know. I think it worked for them. That's one where you do have to take a swing at the quarterback position. But in general, if you look at the playoffs, I think, what was it? Brock Purdy was the only one who wasn't a first round draft pick of all the quarterbacks in the playoffs. I think that's right. So you can't win the lottery if you don't play. And it often requires drafting high in order to get your franchise quarterback. Maybe not number one, but top 10. And they did it with McCarthy. And that's the only top 10 draft pick quarterback that they've taken. What was that, ever or something? I don't remember what the stat was, but it's pretty crazy how rarely they've been in that position to take those quarterbacks, which is your golden ticket. So does the next general manager put a lot more focus on the draft? And are they in a position after this year to draft a quarterback? That's possible. I mean, if Kyler Murray is just okay and they eke out 9 wins and lose in the wild card round, and he's the 19th best quarterback in the league, but it was sort of fun at times, then you're looking at, trying to draft a quarterback next time if they're out on McCarthy or whatever. But your point is well taken, though. I mean, in terms of sweeping changes, I don't think you need to fire scouts. Like, if they're good at their job, but you drafted bad, it's not their fault. But they're still doing their job. But the decision maker needs to be better than what they've been, and they need to do a much better job of thinking in terms of long-term, not we want this player right now, so let's give away a second-round draft pick. We want this player right now, so let's move up in the first round and take him. And, I think Turner is going to be really good next year, but it's almost impossible to justify what you gave away. And we used to say this with Kirk, but it became true about the draft capital. It's like you cannot separate the price from the player. And with someone like Dallas Turner, like, that's not his fault. Dallas has worked his butt off, and we saw it last year, and it was very impressive how much he grew quickly. But in terms of when we're doing the economics of stuff, you got to figure that out and be accurate with it, because there are other teams that are very accurate with it. And when it comes to your drafting, if you're going to have a draft class of 5 people, what do you expect? So those are the types of sweeping changes that I would be thinking about. AP Carlin, what are your thoughts on Mexico City? Never been, have not been. I've been to Canada, but I haven't been to any other country. That's a fun little fact about Purple Insider. I haven't been to any other country except Canada. Now, what do I think about it? I have some questions about the turf, which has been an issue with other international games that I think the NFL needs to put a lot of emphasis on. Wasn't there a game that had to be delayed or canceled or something because the turf was so bad in, was it Mexico City or somewhere else? I'm probably forgetting any details about this, but it has been a problem in a lot of different places. So you do wonder about that and kind of worry about that at times. But overall, I think it's a W for the Vikings. You don't have to go to a place that's been a bit of a house of horrors for you. When was the last time the Vikings won at San Francisco? They lost in 21. They lost in 19. They lost in 15. I don't even remember when the last time that they won in San Francisco was, or Santa Clara. So not having to go there, which has generally been a tough place to play for them, is beneficial. And the math of this is very good. The math is that they now have 9 home games and 7 away games. And this is away, but both teams are away, so it's neutral site. So I think they should be happy with it. And that's probably why it happened. I would guess that the Vikings, with not having, I guess it was 2 road games last year, but having said yes to the international games back to back last year, I think they would have at least built up enough with the NFL to say, okay, stop doing this to us. Can we get a year off? But maybe they saw this as, sure, if you're going to take a game away from San Francisco and keep it in our time zone, then why not? Taslio says, just eating my popcorn, a loud group will be mad no matter what happens this year. Well, unless they win, then most people will be happy. Now, I shouldn't say that, because in 2024, people were still unhappy that they weren't winning with JJ McCarthy. Folks forget that there was not a lot of love for Sam Darnold as a successful Vikings quarterback as it was happening. But I know what you mean. Yeah, people, look, if we didn't argue about football, then what would we be doing here? It's a fun sport to debate and break stuff down and everything else. But I get what you're saying. Like, no matter what happens, the JJ McCarthy people will think he didn't get a fair deal with, Kyler Murray in the competition. But, I think if I've always thought this though, because I think that's what you're referring to. If I was a big JJ McCarthy guy and I had his number tatted on my back and I had JJ forever on my neck, I had, let's say like a chain that had his face in the middle, the picture with a heart, I'd be happy with him getting an opportunity to actually grow his game. Because I've always believed that it's better for young quarterbacks to not play. It's crazy out there, but then the pressure off the field is even worse. The pressure from the locker room to win, the pressure from the organization, the pressure from social media and everything else. And even if you try to tune it out, that's not possible in 2026. Any player who tells you, "Oh, I don't know what's being said out there," how could you not? There's no way to even just live about society and not know what is being said about you. So all that pressure that goes along with it, I think it's harder than ever for young quarterbacks to go into the NFL, especially when they didn't play a lot of college football. So if you're the biggest JJ McCarthy person, I think you should be like, this is good for him. And if you want him to succeed long-term or have even a chance to still be the future franchise quarterback, there is a best case scenario for McCarthy, where Murray plays pretty well, but McCarthy gets opportunities and plays 4 games and goes 3-1 and looks really good. And at the end of the year, the team says, that's the JJ McCarthy we drafted. Thank you, Kyler, for helping us through this year. Now we're going back to McCarthy. Stuff like that has happened and could happen. Anyway, so I'm changing the FanDuel question of the day. I initially wanted to be about Jefferson, but the FanDuel question of the day is the NFC North ranking quarterbacks. It was out there today. ESPN was arguing about it. How would you rank them with Kyler Murray as the Vikings starter? How would you rank them? And I'm going to look just out of curiosity. I'm going to look to see, because I was looking at awards and I know Kyler is like comeback player of the year. I wonder if have the divisions changed at all? Is there any adjustment there? They actually have, it actually has gone back to the Vikings at plus 550. So it was plus 600. So they've updated the NFC North and still have the Lions at plus 155 on FanDuel to win the division. Green Bay plus 230, the Bears plus 310, and the Vikings plus 550. Goff, Love, Williams, and Murray, the quarterbacks there, which usually carries the most weight in the betting markets. So would you agree with that order, or is it a different order for you? FanDuel question of the day. Jim says that I hear Grigson is a possible candidate. I don't know about that. I have not, I don't know if anyone reported it. Usually they do have internal interviews, but even with someone like Rob, it was reported that it was out there, but it's not like they ever announced it. So I don't know. What they're clearly going for is scouting background, and Grigson does have that, but I have not seen officially if they have completed an interview with him or anybody put out any details of whether he's a legitimate candidate or not. Gazinkad, Mexico City is in Central Time. Okay, good to know. Central Standard Time, but Minnesota's in Central Daylight Time. But by the time the game starts, it'll be back on Standard Time. Okay, I'm glad that Gazinkad, I'm really glad we sorted that out. So it will be a 7:20 start here and a 7:20 start for the players' bodies in Mexico City. But thank you for that. So it is different. It technically is different. So right now in Mexico City, it's what, an hour behind or ahead? Behind? I don't know. Takes on time. Anyway, Jay says Vikings need another defensive end, thin at that position. What are your thoughts? Who would you sign? Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, but I do think that they need someone else there because there isn't anyone proven behind that position. And the Vikings have done this before, though, where we've spent an offseason banging a drum. And this was like 2023 or no, 2024. When are you getting a corner? When are you getting a corner? What is going on? And then at the end, they come in and do it. That was the same with wide receiver last year. At the end of training camp, they grab one. And that might be how they approach this. Let's first see if any of the group of young players behind those guys end up taking a big jump. But it's kind of hard to see. I mean, Bo Richter is a great special teamer. He should be on this team. As a pass rushing starter, that's a lot to ask. Same with Chaz Chambliss. Tyler Batty, I think, has some potential there, but these are all unproven, undrafted free agents. I mean, it's not like an Epinesa or a Kyle Van Noy, who are my two nominations, that has been around the league. Or, Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd has been a pain in the Vikings behind for quite a while. AP Carlin, is Addison's down year last year on him or JJ? I think the answer is kind of both. There are certainly some passes that, he should have caught, but dude, if you throw it that hard, it's going to be pretty difficult for any wide receiver to grab. But there were other ones that were right in the midst that he needs to bring in, concentration catches or whatever it was. I don't think that we can put entirely on McCarthy. I do think with receivers that timing is a big deal. And when the timing was thrown so far off on some of those throws that you do get messed up. And if you ever tried to catch a pass from an NFL quarterback throwing it as hard as they can at you, I promise you'd have more respect for some of the drops that receivers have. But there were some that needed to be caught from Jordan Addison that didn't. And so there is a little bit of that hovering of, it's not just the casino thing. It's not. It's also because to me that didn't end up really materializing, other than you shouldn't be in the news for this ever, Jordan Addison, and you don't get the benefit of the doubt based on your history. But aside from that, it's this is not Al Capone here, but the drops and some of the concentration elements, maybe early in 2024, he's been a very, very good player. But when you're making a decision, do you want to stick long-term? Do you want to pay $25 million a year? Something like that, it has to be in the thought process. So if that doesn't turn around, he's not completely different with Kyler Murray, then they will be having that conversation of, can you really pay this guy? Dirty Mike, Goff's flaws like Kirk's make beating contenders extremely challenging, but can feast on teams below the top tier. Sometimes true. I mean, the guy did make it to a Super Bowl. And if Josh Reynolds catches a ball, he makes it to 2 Super Bowls. He did beat the Vikings defense repeatedly when he had a good offensive line. I think that, and I also think just in general, like Goff is compared to Kirk. To me, he's not. I mean, to me, he's bigger. His arm is much stronger. His execution when things are right for him is unstoppable, where, Kirk's very good. We know this. Kirk was very good. I think Goff is on a different level. And I think because neither of them runs and they're a pocket quarterback, they get put together. But one guy was the number 1 overall pick in the draft for a reason. I mean, that arm is pretty ridiculous. So I think that he is the best execution quarterback. A really hot take there would be that Jared Goff is closer to Tom Brady than he is Kirk Cousins. But if you just mentioned Tom Brady at all, it's like, no, you can't compare anybody. But in terms of how he actually plays, his willingness to, check down or throw swing passes at the right times, his vision for how he sees the field, stays in the pocket. And when, this is true of Tom Brady, when he would get pressure, he would come apart. I'm not saying Goff is him. I'm saying that there's a lot of similarities with how they play, and there is a kryptonite element. And when you're Goff and you've had some years with really, really great offensive lines, and you've gone to a Super Bowl and you've taken teams to the NFC Championship and top 5 offenses, but at some point you usually reach a team, and then this is what you're saying, you usually reach a team that gets you, that gets after you and pressures you, and Goff has never really had an answer for it. So I'm not saying he's Brady. I'm saying that they win in similar types of ways with, offenses that allow for, if you can process it really well and you can see the field and understand your offense and execute, then you can put up big numbers. But I don't think that he's just like a garbage time merchant or whatever, where it's, when he plays bad teams, he puts up huge stats and then just loses to the good teams. That's not really true. I mean, he's had a ton of games. I mean, they went 15-2. He's had tons of games against good teams and good defenses where he's played well over the years. It's just when you don't win a ring and you aren't flashy, see, if you are flashy, if you're Justin Herbert and you're flashy and everyone loves you, then no matter what happens, you just get apologized for and you're the best quarterback and it's wonderful. But if you're Jared Goff and you're flawed, like you're saying, like, and it's not flashy, and Goff throwing a swing pass, which is maybe the right decision, and then getting 30 yards, or the right check down, or just hitting a crossing pattern between a certain type of defense that he read perfectly and executed perfectly, it's just not a highlight reel thing. So the highlight reel quarterbacks always get way more benefit of the doubt than Goff. And those types of quarterbacks like Goff, they have to win a Super Bowl or everyone will say they stink forever. I don't know why. It just is because quarterback analysis is very lazy. I think that's the main thing. If year after year you can put yourself in a position to have a championship caliber offense as a quarterback, there's only so many times where you can be like, no, it's the line, it's the receivers, it's the coordinator, it's the this, and just it's that way with Brock Purdy. Like, how many times does Brock Purdy have to play really good football before we just say he's a good quarterback, but he's not perfect? Dak Prescott is a great quarterback. He's just not perfect. And Mahomes has not been perfect in years, and Josh Allen is not perfect, and whatever. But there is to the flashier players, the stronger arm or the bigger or whatever it might be, they just tend to get a lot more credit, and it's probably because they have more solutions to problems than someone like Jared Goff. Like, if Goff is pressured, he just has no answer. He can't escape. He can't throw on the run. And someone like Allen or Mahomes, like, they can pull something out when it's not going their way. And that's really the difference. But I think that Goff, based on the numbers he's put up and the offenses he's had, has every right to be the number one quarterback in the NFC North. And I just think that people put it into aesthetics maybe way too much rather than actual production. Because if Justin Herbert had the same seasons as Jared Goff, I mean, there would just be endless, well, there already is for whatever. There already is endless fawning over him. And I don't mean to be down on him. I just have not seen it in the same way as other people. But there's just endless excuses and endless fawning over Justin Herbert when he doesn't put up the same type of production as Jared Goff for years. For 10 years now, almost. I mean, so I don't know. It's a weird thing. Mike says, Love is the best quarterback in the North. Take the Homer glasses off. The thing about every NFC North quarterback is that on a given week or even a given month, they can all be the best quarterback in the North. That's why the conversation is interesting, but we also don't have like this clear-cut answer, because there are stretches where Caleb Williams will be and has been the best quarterback in the North. And there are stretches where Jordan Love is, but every season with Jordan Love seems like 10 games of being amazing. And the rest is up for, I guess, interpretation. The rest is Matt LaFleur's fault. The rest is the running game's fault. It's kind of like the Herbert stuff. And he has the huge arm. He has the highlight reel. He gets a lot of credit for that. And I think he's very good. But it's been inconsistent, and that's the struggle. I feel like Goff is probably the most consistent quarterback there is in the division, where week after week after week, you're probably getting 12 to 14 good games out of him in a season, unless he but he runs into that one opponent in the big game and he ends up looking bad, and then everyone says he's not good. So it's a really interesting question. Murray for stretches in 2024. Even just 2024, Kyler Murray would have been the best quarterback in the NFC North the way he played for Arizona, but then had stretches where he would have been the worst. And what the Vikings are trying to do is even that out. Contra Pastin says the cult of McVay worship scarred Goff's reputation. National media thinks Sean can do no wrong. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. It's if Sean McVay decided that this guy wasn't good enough and they needed to trade him for Stafford, and then they win the Super Bowl, then he must be awful. And he must be just a product of the system and everything else. But Jared Goff has long proved that to be wrong. And I think McVay deserves all the credit that he gets, but I agree with you that everyone judged that decision just on, oh, well, this means that Goff is terrible. What it meant is that Stafford has something that Goff doesn't. And they needed that with that team. Also, Jared Goff, the last year he was in Los Angeles, he had the worst or one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And he had never had that before in Los Angeles. He had always had good offensive lines, and then they got a ton of injuries. I think they were like 28th or something by PFF. That's just not going to work with Jared Goff. And Stafford, also, they rebuilt the line and it was healthy in 2021. They were, I think, the best pass blocking unit in the NFL. But Stafford has, and this is the slight difference between very, very good and you can definitely win with them in the right year and maybe gives you that extra gear, is that Stafford can throw a no-look pass in the Super Bowl with the game on the line. And Stafford can, it's funny because he is a quarterback that could play out of structure. I think that was in part why they wanted him, but then he doesn't really do that anymore because his back is so messed up. So he's been forced to be a pocket QB, and it's been better for him. So it ends up being a great trade for both teams. The Rams get the Super Bowl championship, but Goff, I mean, year after year after year, top 5 offenses. At some point, the quarterback has a lot to do with it. Mike, do not extend Cashman. The contract will age like Barr and Kendrick's contracts. Really depends. I don't think he's that old. I mean, by linebacker standards. And those were big. Those were kind of big contracts. Like Barr got a big contract. I don't know that it would be like a top of market type of deal. Cashman, the concern is just injury. It's not how he plays. His explosiveness is very much still there. I don't think that's going to fall off at all. It just comes down to, can you stay healthy? And that would be the major concern about extending him. That's really it, though. The leadership element, the violence that he plays with, the instincts that he has. I don't quite see the same thing there between Barr and Kendricks, but it would depend on the dollar figure for sure. Contrapasted Michigan fan JJ seems younger now than he did at UM, almost like success went to his head and caused him to regress. You know, I really think that it was, I think that we don't ever think about enough the strain that an injury puts on somebody, physically, mentally, all that sort of stuff, and how hard mentally playing quarterback in the NFL really is. It is so difficult. And I think that you come in with so much confidence if you're McCarthy, and then you get really hit hard in the face in Atlanta, but then also with the injury, you come off the injury, get the big win. It's JJ McCarthy's here. At the time, after they won against the Detroit Lions in his return game, I was saying, I'm sure everybody else was saying, like, yep, this is what it was supposed to look like. He did everything that he was supposed to do in that game. And even though he didn't put up huge stats, like it was like a Teddy Bridgewater win when he was a young quarterback. Like, find a way and do enough and keep the train on the tracks, make 1 or 2 good plays, 2 good throws or runs, and you're going to be able to win. But I think that after that, I don't know if it was success or it was the failure of the following week or two that just weighed. And it's, man, it really feels like when you're in that seat that the weight of the world is entirely on you and you are just letting down everybody and you're being mocked mercilessly on the internet and everything else. It's really, really hard. And I think it just takes a long time for some people to get used to that, if not everyone to get used to it. And maybe it shows more with others. But I really think what it came down to is that the timing of his throws was just off because the game is so much faster and you have to see things so much quicker and it takes reps. I mean, there's a lot of different things we could sort of opine about, but the number of reps is just not high enough for him to have been able to come in because he's not a naturally accurate thrower. He has to learn how to be accurate. So when you're not a naturally accurate thrower and you're trying to time things that are down to the millisecond, it takes anticipation, and he has never been really an anticipation thrower. Like, it's a lot of practice that has to go into it to maximize those tools. So I think that that's kind of what it's about. But he did show at times last year. I do agree with you. I'm not disagreeing there. I do agree with you that he showed that he was not mature-wise really ready to take on a whole franchise in certain ways. Not like screwing off or whatever, but just in terms of like handling the whole thing. Being coachable at times, it seems like wasn't always what you would expect from like a veteran quarterback. And I also think that Kevin O'Connell So I'll give you an example, and it's gonna sound funny, but you guys know who watch all the time that we have the Greyhound, and when we first adopt the Greyhound, he was a race dog, and he doesn't really know how to be a dog, and he's kind of crazy, and he is kind of all over the place, and he won't really do anything that we want him to do. And you sort of forget, if you had been without, like we were without a dog for a little while, you sort of forget that, oh yeah, that process of getting a dog to be comfortable in your house, it takes a while. And I think KOC may have forgotten that too about really young quarterbacks, where he had been working with Darnold and working with Kirk and working with Mullins and Matthew Stafford before that, like maybe didn't fully remember how much work it is for a young quarterback, and how sometimes like you just can't put certain things on their plate. And then by the end of the year, kind of figured that out. So, Mike, I think you're being a little unfair on McCarthy. There's no quarterback in the world that doesn't have a big ego. I mean, come on. Like if you want to be that guy, you gotta have a lot of self-confidence. So I think that's unfair. Look, if JJ McCarthy had played really well and he did the whole, what was he calling himself? 9 thing, everyone would have ate it up. Everyone would have loved it. If you win, they love it. If you don't, they hate it. And they'll make fun of you. And that's what it is. Son of Beavers read that Scooby Williams, we'll always remember Scooby Williams, Viking, failed his physical. So who was the guy? Who was the guy? They had PJ Hall. He goes under the PJ Hall category of, was once a Viking, but failed the physical. What vet should you sign to provide a little depth? Yeah, I mean, I think the outside linebacker position makes so much sense, but I would also toss out there, if they feel like Harrison Smith is not going to come back, then Donovan Wilson, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, is still out there. I would definitely consider him. He, at one time, was a pretty good playmaker. He's been a good blitzer. He fell off last year, but I mean, he just, that was a terrible defense. I think he can still play. And I'm just a little bit suspect on Jacoby Thomas, Jay Ward, Theo Jackson. Let's roll the ball out there and see. Would prefer to have a veteran in there with that group, even if he ends up being a backup. Contra Paston, if you said 2 years ago that Darnold won the Super Bowl, I would have assumed it was with the Vikings. Yeah. Well, and who knows how it would have played out last year, because had they gotten healthy down the stretch and made the playoffs with Sam Darnold, the way the defense was playing, who knows? Tony, what are your favorite golf courses? I usually play city courses, man. I like, Hiawatha and Highland in St. Paul, and places like that, places that are worthy of my talent level. Because I feel like I would be wronging the golf universe if I went to really awesome courses and then was not that great. So, but breaking 80 is the goal this year. We'll see if we can get there at some point. The way I played the last 2 days would not be quite there yet. So we got to get a little more consistency. Putting is the hardest thing to get in the spring because the greens are just not what you expect. And also it's so much touch. So we're working on it. We're getting there. Friends of Taz rewatched week 9 versus Detroit today, and there were drops on great throws to Addison and Hawkinson that would have made the game less close and boosted JJ's stats. They ran a lot as well, and they won. Yeah, I mean, look, they showed that you can win with JJ McCarthy if things go the right way, and he played very well in that game, but we can't. And clearly by getting Kyler Murray, they proved this. They were not going to look the other way. If you have 12 interceptions and are sacked, he was sacked as many times as Sam Darnold was and dropped back 1/3 as many times. Like, you just can't have that. So you have to learn how to really play the quarterback position. And that's a process. If we just take the best moments, that's the reason to not get rid of JJ McCarthy, is that the best moments matter. The high end matters, but all the other stuff cannot be ignored in this conversation. So that's why you don't just bail on him and you don't just say, all right, well, he stinks and we're over him and whatever. It's like, no, we've seen a lot of things that were very good from JJ McCarthy, but the bad stuff happened way, way, way too often to win in the NFL consistently. So there's things there and they need to be refined, and whether they get refined will basically determine whether he works out in the NFL or not. Jay, what's the weakest link of the Vikings heading into the 2026 season? The weakest link right now, we've talked a little bit about the safety position, talked a little bit about center. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really probably what it is. What they can't allow to be the weakest link is the defensive tackle spot. Because if that's not way better against the run and at least helpful in pass rush, then things are, not going to be better as the overall defense. But the safety spot and losing Harrison Smith is probably the one that I would focus on the most. It's not something that you could just wave a magic wand and Harrison Smith shows up. Even if Metellus can play that role, even if he's like a big nickel and has the communication element, that's a hard thing to deal with. I would say if you're going to have a weakest position, you'd want it to be safety. If it ends up being defensive tackle and those are two of your top draft picks, that's kind of a problem. But if you'd rather have it be safety than other stuff, like corner, you'll just get destroyed. Edge rusher, if you can't pressure the quarterback, you're not going to do very well. Other than that, though, I would have said wide receiver depth, but that was, greatly improved. Evolution, if Murray goes 9-8, we pick 18th. Good luck getting a quarterback. You make a fair point. I think it's one of the reasons to trade Jonathan Grenard is to get extra draft capital if you do need to move up in the draft to take a quarterback. But the concern and I think the cynical Viking follower would probably say that's a very likely outcome. And I think that's fair. They have to take every shot they can with this year's group, because the other option was moving on from Aaron Jones and TJ Hawkinson. And what difference does that make? Like, what, instead of 9, you win 8? What's the difference? So go for it with this group. You've put it together. You like these veterans. You think you can be really damn good. So go for it, right? You think Murray could take this huge step. You think he's going to prove everybody wrong, and maybe he will. It's worth rolling the dice for that. And it might be a magical season, and you never know. This guy was the number 1 overall draft pick. He has been a Pro Bowler. He's been, 4,000 yard passer, all these things. It's in there somewhere, or at least it has been. You might as well roll the dice and take a shot for this year. But in the future, you'd like them to think about this a little bit more in those terms that you're talking about. Is 9-8 and drafting 18th is not going to help you get the future franchise quarterback if it's not Kyler Murray. Raiden says Love is inconsistent, doesn't elevate the team around him, and doesn't have a number 1 wide receiver or elite offensive line. Like the Packers, Love will be mediocre for the foreseeable future. I don't think he was mediocre last year. I thought he was really good last year overall. Just on the whole, his accumulation of his 2025 season was very, very good. But I agree with your points. He does not have a true number 1 wide receiver. He does not have a top-notch offensive line, which means it's going to be a lot of up and down for Jordan Love. That's why it's hard to put him as the best quarterback in the NFC North. Talent-wise, I think if you put him on the Vikings, he would be. Arm strength-wise and accuracy is fairly consistent for him, but I think that his lack of playmaking does show up that he's really a pocket quarterback. He has every ability to be, and playmaking, I mean, 2 things really. It would be like escaping rush and making a play on the run. You just don't see it as much as you'd think from Jordan Love, and actually running, scrambling. He doesn't do it. He wants to stay in there and throw. So you don't really have that element of his game that some other quarterbacks like Caleb Williams and Kyler Murray have. He won't run for 500 yards, but Kyler Murray will, and Caleb Williams will. So that, I think, leads to inconsistencies as well, because some of the scrambling, like with a Josh Allen, if you're not having the best game passing the football, but you can do something else, I think it leads to less inconsistency. But their team around him, it's just okay. The running game might be just okay. Their offensive line might be just okay. Their receivers might be just okay. Tucker Kraft, I think, is very, very good. But aside from that, it's hard to find, amazing on that Packers roster around Jordan Love. And you have to evaluate it within the context, for sure. Mama, we need Manny's thoughts on the schedule to predict our record for this year. That will happen eventually. Tomorrow, though, Manny is not going to be available, so it'll be me doing it. But we'll do it with Manny for sure when we can. I really badly wanted Manny on tomorrow to pick the schedule as soon as it came out for sure. And I was texting him about it, but he will. Probably next week. It's a long off season. We'll have plenty of chances for Manny to pick the schedule. Friends of Taz has heard Eisen implying the Vikings could still be in play for a trade for Max Crosby. How that would make the Vikings instant contenders. It's clickbait season. Yeah, that would not make a lick of sense for me. Also, they don't have a GM. So how the hell would we know what they're going to do right now? They can't. You're not trading for Max Crosby if you don't have a GM. Now, if you get a GM, I guess you could certainly consider that, but not after the way they manage this offseason. You're going to suddenly cobble together a bunch of draft capital to throw at the Raiders. That would be very, very odd. Maybe not clickbait season, but hey, do you believe they could do this season? I don't know. You could do every single team. I actually think that Sam and Steve on Check the Mic, I haven't gotten to this podcast yet, but I think they did like how every team could win the Super Bowl, which is a fun thing to do at this time of year because it's kind of like that. Evolution, the Niners were just better than us for the last 10 years. They aren't scary nowadays. Well, they were in the divisional round last year. They still do have the best coach, but I don't think they are as good as they've been. Like you said, 2019, that's a monster. They go to the Super Bowl. 2023, the Vikings did beat them at home twice. Going there, I think, has been very, very hard for the Vikings. They're still pretty scary. Trent Williams is still good. Christian McCaffrey is still good. If George Kittle comes back to 100%, Kyle Shanahan's got just an incredible offensive mind. But it's not the same. It's not of that level. It feels like they're sliding down the slippery mountain, like the wrong side, the bad side. That there's not much left in terms of how many more years can they be that competitive. Yeah, I agree with that. Mama says, is it bad? I'm still unsure about the Caleb Banks pick like I was on draft night. No, it is not bad. It's completely fair to have skepticism about whether that's going to play out or not. It's a bold pick to go with when most of the world thought he was more of a second round draft pick, but they're believing in themselves. And now it's something that we're going to be watching. But the thing that we can't really do with Caleb Banks is have and I know it's football, so we're going to, but a week to week, maybe we should make a bit out of it. Is Caleb Banks a hit or bust? Well, he played 23 snaps and had one quarterback pressure. This week he's a bust. Next week he's a hit. Might be some of that. I think the hard part about this is it's going to be a little bit of a longer evaluation on Banks unless he just immediately starts throwing people around and is amazing. It's just going to be a little bit more of a slow process with him. So the first week of the season, his first game, you might not think, wow, they crushed that draft pick. But maybe by week 10, you're starting to think that. We'll have to be a little bit patient with it. Nomad, you're funny, Nomad. Bo Richter should play more. Big Moinas. I like Bo Richter a lot. I as a special teamer, I don't know if he can be somebody. He might be like a guy that you could put out there occasionally in some sort of role to blitz or whatever. I just don't think that he's going to be somebody that you say, oh, that's proven depth. He's a very good athlete and he's one of those guys that could play inside or outside in a pinch, but it's just hard to see a ceiling there of, hey, Bo Richter's going to be playing 300 snaps on the edge like you could see from Jihad Ward or some other veteran. But I do think that his role is important on the special teams and he could be a little bit of depth, but he's much more of that kind of deep depth type of guy. Friends of Taz, will anyone challenge Miles Price for the return specialist position? I could see Damon Claiborne getting in the mix, possibly. Skull Shadow, Goff is like Eli Manning. He needs a village to take him anywhere. I think he's a little different from Eli in that Eli didn't take sacks very often. Well, no, I guess Goff doesn't really, but Eli was amazing at it, not taking sacks. And he was The difference would be that Eli was super aggressive, a downfield thrower. And if things went his way, he's actually, I think of Eli Manning as more like Jordan Love, where if things click for him, he could get so blazing hot and just win a Super Bowl. I could see Jordan Love going through 4 weeks and just every downfield pass, somebody catches it off a helmet and it just works for him. Goff is just a great executor, play in and play out. But it does take things going his way. It does take pass protection, really. Whenever he's had pass protection and weapons, he's great. But to your point, there's no quarterback who just takes themselves there. Otherwise, Josh Allen would have 4 Super Bowls. So there's nobody. Can I try to get some former players on the show? I love that you mentioned all legends and then Sean Salisbury. That's funny. Like Chris Carter, Robert Smith, John Randall, Randy Moss. Randy Moss, it does not do a lot of appearances. I don't know how much I would have to pay Randy Moss to come on. I've had John Randall and Chris Carter before and Robert Smith. So I have checked off a few of those boxes. If anybody knows Randy, we could try. But yeah, I don't know Sean Salisbury either. Had CJ Ham the other day. You could check that one out. Break 80. That's awesome. Well, I'm in the worst spot with golf that you can be in, where I am good enough to play right on that line of breaking 80, but I am not good enough to actually be breaking 80. So I am better than some people, but I am not really actually good at this. It's a tough place to be. I've been working on it and I've got the golf net in the backyard, but it's just not to be an excuse guy, but did you see spring? It was awful. I would love to have 10 rounds in by right now. And I have like 4. Is what it is. So the weakest link is the field goal holder. Well, if they go with Johnny Hecker, he should be fine. He's done it a long time. Jay, what team is the biggest threat to the Vikings in the NFC North? I've bounced all over the place on this, man. I said in my NFC North power rankings, the first edition, which was early April, and I'm going to try to do, somebody asked for once a month. Like, I think that's a great idea. I had Detroit as the favorite. They're the favorite on FanDuel to win the division. And then Chuck Foreman. That's a good one. I could probably get Chuck. And then I had the Lions 4th the last time I did it. So I actually don't have a great answer. I actually don't have a great answer to that. Like, because they're so even. Who's the biggest threat? Like they're all so close. It's probably the team. So I guess I'll say it this way. The team that could be the best, like the highest ceiling if everything goes right for them, is the Lions. We've seen it. They've won the division. They've even last year had still a great offense and had the best point differential. So I think the Lions are the one with the highest ceiling, unless Caleb Williams becomes Josh Allen. Then all bets are off. So anyway, well, great conversation as always, guys. Really, really appreciate it. I am going to go watch some Minnesota Wild hockey. So I'm really glad everybody could tune in. Tomorrow night will be exciting as soon as the Minnesota Vikings send out their schedule and we have it officially. I know there's leaks all day. I try not to look at them because sort of like the draft, Christmas morning, let it happen. But as soon as that comes out, the schedule, and I will live pick the games. I will not pick the games beforehand. I'm just going to go W's and L's. You could pick along with me, play along with me, and decide what we think on May 14th the Vikings record is going to be. I always enjoy doing that. We'll talk about best road trips. We'll talk about toughest stretches, easiest stretches, interesting factors, great matchups, and the games we can't wait to see. So I look forward to that tomorrow night. I would assume that's going to be around 7 Central that they drop that, but if it's a little earlier, we'll be right here. So thank you again so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow night.